Welcome to Sweeping the Country, once again, the podcast designed for you. And today on the show, boy, a very special Vault edition, Jimmy. I mean, this is huge.
Well, for radio geeks and people who love radio, these two voices are the two most successful voices of the last 50 years.
Indeed.
On radio. One had a syndicated program that also had a TV, but he had a big radio show that was heard by millions and millions of people. 15 million estimated audience at one point, most listened to radio show in the United States, and an author. Then the other guy, he had at least that many listening to him with his segments called Paul Harvey News and Comment. He ran them in the morning. That was, I think, 10 or 15 minutes in the morning. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was just 5 minutes. I don't even know what it was now. In the early morning, like 7 or 8. But then he did like 15 minutes in the noontime hour.
Yeah.
And then he had a book called The Rest of the Story that his son had something to do with. But both these people are great. And let's start it out with Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh passed away not that long ago, February 17th of 2021 at the age of 70. Controversial, no doubt about it. You either loved him or you hated him, and you had pretty strong feelings about both sides of that. He was one of it, but you'd have to admit, even if you hate him, he was one of the most influential broadcasters of the last 25 years. He was a lightning rod.
Yes,
he was a lightning rod, and he was, boy, and would he have been even more in trouble because he surely wasn't woke. And he certainly wasn't politically correct.
No, he was
and
not.
He had early on. He was worse because he had these songs, So how did I end up talking to Rush Limbaugh? Because he didn't do many.
Yeah, what the heck? I mean, that's the main thing I'm thinking, and I'm thinking everybody listening. Why in the world? I mean, was it about his radio program, a movie?
No, we were at a convention. We were at a convention, and he was selling his television show. He was going to have a show that was like a Donahue. I don't even know how to relate it to anything because there isn't a show like that in modern time. But it would be a host with an audience, a live audience. Well, Dr. Phil is the closest thing to it.
Okay.
Probably today, except this would be, with controversial subjects and whatever else.
Yeah.
But he was selling it. He wasn't doing interviews. I don't know what I said or what I did, or maybe I just snagged him. For 3 minutes on his way, and I got him for whatever it was here, 10 or 12.
What a cool
And I think he knew, it's again, if you've just got a little bit of sense, with most people, like a Henry Mancini or a Lionel Richie or whoever it is, if they even halfway know that you're not doing gotcha or you're not a nut or you're somebody who's done their homework and maybe knows what they're talking about, let's try it and see. Here is the great Rush Limbaugh.
I was watching some of the publicity tapes for your new TV show, and it really is amazing for a radio person. Radio people never get to see their audience unless they're doing a remote for a food store or something, and you really see your audience, and that has to make you have a little different feeling towards your audience than most.
Well, I do a lot of personal appearances. I travel about 35 to 40 weekends a year doing a stage show, a personal appearance. Seeing the audience is a part of that. But I think what I try to do on the radio and I'm going to try to translate to television is just be myself and not really pay so much attention to the way it ought to be done, the way it always has been done. Radio show has busted a whole bunch of rules of thumb. It's busted a lot of convention, and the television show is going to do the same thing.
Everybody is talking about you, and you're very, very hot. Does it scare you a little bit that you're so hot that things that get that hot sometimes cool down a little bit?
No, I people ask me this in one vein or another. Are you a fad? Is this going to peak anytime soon? Is it going to burn out? I think because of the nature of the program and how it's built and what the program is event-oriented. It's not guest-oriented or topic-driven. It's event-driven. It's always going to be current. It's always going to be spontaneous and unpredictable. And so it's never, I don't think it's going to have the features that are going to qualify it for burnout. The best answer I can give you is the radio show. I started, 1984, 8 years ago in Sacramento, California. It's hotter than it's ever been. I've now been out of Sacramento doing this show longer than I was living there. And I think that's the best evidence, 8 years, and it just continues to trend up. So no, I feel very confident. I think that's something about which I have a lot of control, which gives me some confidence about it.
I would easily say that you're very misunderstood. Do you find that generally?
Oh, gee, yeah, but sometimes that's good. I mean, I'm misunderstood in ways that would give critics and competitors the attitude, we don't need to take this guy seriously. He's just an extremist. He's just a racist. He's a sexist. He's a homophobe. He's a bigot. He's all of these things, which they think, which is untrue, but they think it, and they're not going to take me seriously. And so that's a position I kind of like being. The audience understands me, and that's the key. This program will be done, as the radio show is, for viewers. The idea of this show is to attract viewers, hold them for as long as we can so that we can charge confiscatory advertising rates. The same principle on the radio show. But it's not, I don't think that the misunderstanding among critics and other people in the business is going to be harmful at all.
You've had some real wackos not attack you physically, but I guess they would have if they could have. What is it you're doing that's touching such a nerve on the far left wing, I would probably think, in this country?
Well, there's a reality and a truth out there that can't be denied, and people may want to argue about it, but the media, the major media, the dominant national media in this country is populated with people who for the most part are liberal, which is fine, no quarrel with that, it's just a fact. And here comes this show, which is not. Here's a show which pays allegiance to many of the institutions and traditions which have made the country great, which the national media doesn't represent. I mean, you look at primetime television, books, newspapers, news, many things that a lot of Americans believe in are made fun of and ridiculed, and this show doesn't do that. So it's filled that void, and it's skewering many of these sacred cows that have been allowed to survive for the longest time. And I think that really is the short answer to your question.
As a member of the media, have you been burned by the media?
Meaning
misquoted? All
the time. I mean, I've gotten a lot of press, a lot of local press. Interestingly enough, the best press that I have gotten has been the national stuff. The New York Times Sunday Magazine did perhaps the definitive piece. The Los Angeles Times Sunday Magazine, tremendous piece. It's when I go out into local markets that some of the highfalutin local editorialists and so forth want to make their point and use me as the means by which to prove theirs, and some of it is the gross misrepresentations and all that. But I mean, that's part of the territory, and I've developed a thick skin about it. It used to bother me. I want to be liked like everybody else and respected like everybody else wants to be, but I have discovered that people take this political stuff real seriously. Donahue, I get along with him fine. We have total disagreements. He's a nice guy. But there are a lot of liberals who will refuse to be seen or associate with me because they think it somehow damaged their credibility. The usual question I get, thank you for not doing it, is, all right, who are you to breathe? Who are you to be alive with what you believe and so forth? That generally constitutes the opening salvo, the people you're talking about. But I've developed a way to deal with them now.
So you're picking up on Mr. Reagan's silent majority, you think, a little bit?
Well, see, I think this country has always had a great percentage of conservative people. And I think that, we'll go back to the national media thing. The reason why they're a silent majority is because things they believe in are made fun of. And it takes a leader to make them confident and bring them out. And Reagan did that. I think they've always been there. I think if you look at what some of the Democratic candidates for president are talking about doing, tax cuts. Gee, when was the last time you ever heard a Democrat suggest that? That's a conservative principle. In New Jersey today, they just signed into law, a Democratic governor just signed into law a bill which caps the number of kids welfare recipient mothers can get. The National Organization for Women's all upset, but it was a black Democrat who did this. I think it's a recognition that kind of thinking, and the middle class is tired of bearing this burden. They're conservative people, and Democrats are starting to, in some cases, appeal to them better than President Bush is. I think that the country has always had a large percentage of conservative people that have just not been catered to by the media for the most part.
You mostly stick, you get on every subject, but political commentary is kind of your thing. Is that your hot button?
Yeah, well, that's my passion. What I do, I think, is combine two approaches. There is irreverence, not just a sense of humor, but irreverence, and a serious discussion of issues in the same show. And this is not a criticism, again, it's just an observation. I don't know of another show where that happens. If Ted Koppel, for example, ever tried to get funny, I don't know how it would be accepted. The audience isn't tuned in for that. And if Leno or Letterman ever really got serious about what they believe, I think, oh, wait, I'm uncomfortable. This show does both, and the television show will do both. And I think that, again, is going to set it apart.
We're all big kids in broadcasting anyway, if we're honest about it, because we still get thrilled when we know someone's watching us or seeing us. Who has thrilled you that I found out, Henry Mancini, by the way, listens to you all the time. It came out in an interview that we were talking about. Yes.
I didn't know that.
Because I found out, I've been interviewing musicians a lot lately, and they're all listening to talk radio because they're burned out on music. Henry Mancini, Huey Lewis, all these kind of people. Who have you found out that listens to you that's just thrilled you?
Well, Reagan. Some sports people. I'm a big sports nut. These are tough questions. Like saying who's the most beautiful Hollywood actress? I mean, I know, but now I'm going into I'm freezing trying to think of who.
But a pretty big hit. It's nice to know he's listening.
Yeah, but there have been so many that have. Some of them I've met too, and it is. You're right. It is a big thrill. You know, especially for me. All my life I've done local talk. You sit in a local market, you have a little studio and so forth, and you may become a big fish in a little market or you may not. Going national, the surroundings don't change. I mean, your environment is still the same. It's a little studio, the microphone, but all of a sudden, 50 states, Guam and Puerto Rico are listening. And I have not conceived that in my mind. I don't picture that, and I haven't changed my approach. And so there's a lot of it that's flattering and surprising when I hear all these people that listen and enjoy it. That's key when they say they enjoy it, too.
Did it make you mad initially? And we'll use this name in the question. It won't come out in the interview. I mean, Larry King, your fans would call, I call them fans as opposed to listeners, because I think they are. They called the Larry King show. What about Rush Limbaugh? I don't even know who he is. I mean, you kind of sneaked up on people, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I've never been a networker, and I've never been one to read the trades and correspond with the movers and shakers in the trades, especially since I got back into the business the second time. I quit after 12 years, after thinking I'd failed at it, and went into sports marketing for the Kansas City Royals and got back into it. And my attitude about it the second time in has been totally different than the first 12 years I was in it. And I did sneak up. Who is this guy? Never heard of this guy. I never used my real name in radio the first 12 years. So, yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, that stuff used to bother me. I mean, I'm like anybody else. I'm no different. I'm a human being. And in my business, with my peers, everybody would love to be respected and liked. And so we're all in this together. But it isn't going to happen for, human characteristics, jealousy, envy, what have you. And so, all that stuff has just served to give me a thick skin.
A man who had no shortage of opinions and no shortage of people who loved and hated him.
That's a fact.
One of a kind Rush, buried in Bellefontaine Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri. His wife, he's got a book coming out really soon.
Yeah.
His wife, Catherine, and his brother put it together, and it's kind of like the greatest hits of his show with some other things. And I believe he did work on it at the last bit before he passed away. So
he was
Rush Limbaugh, what can I say?
He was a very, very rich man too. He was one of those guys that capitalized on his talent.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
he made a lot of money. And he had bestsellers. He had 7 books.
Yeah.
I think he was one of those rare people that made money on writing a book.
Yeah, no kidding.
And he was controversial. Now this guy was not controversial.
No,
I mean, I guess everybody. Mother Hubbard in the cupboard was everybody's controversial, I guess.
Yeah.
But Paul Harvey was not. And he was a voice of news, and certainly in the 70s. And Paul Harvey was just one of the coolest broadcasters. He worked out of Chicago. He had so many things that he did, that he was just unique. And he did the news. And he did it in a unique way.
Yes, he did.
And I guess the rest of the story were definitely, that was very popular.
Yeah.
He was syndicated. ABC put him out. He came over the ABC radio network. Mornings and middays, reached as many as 24 million people per week, which is maybe more than that. He was from Oklahoma, and he didn't do interviews. So that was the first question I had for Paul Harvey. Are you okay with doing this?
Mr. Harvey, do you really like being on the other side of the reporter's mic?
No, this isn't my choice, Jimmy. Thank you very much. Do you mind if I interview you instead?
No, thank you. No, thank you. It's a little different, though, having to answer questions than ask them, though, isn't it?
Yes, of course it is. I'm always flattered by this kind of attention, but I'm so much more comfortable when I can be challenging somebody else's intellect.
A little classification here. Do you consider yourself a reporter or a commentator?
When I started in broadcasting, Jimmy, we were all very carefully categorized. You first started out as a news reporter. Then when you got a few miles on you and better than average batting average, you were allowed to call yourself a news analyst. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, after you'd weathered a few more storms and had established a degree of responsibility, you were allowed to call yourself a commentator. Now, of course, all those lines are blurred. Now almost everybody calls himself a reporter or an anchor or whatever it is. But they're all commenting. They're commenting only by what they toss in the wastebasket and what they use. It seems much more honest to me to just call it Paul Harvey News and comment and then view the world from my own perspective and let people understand that that's what it is.
Have you ever gotten any trouble or criticism over the years for blurring the line sometimes, maybe?
Oh, of course. Of course, it took people a lot of years to get used to the idea, but I think everybody is now. Mm-hmm. No, there's no longer much criticism of that because everybody understands that what they're listening to is Paul Harvey News.
I was asking you earlier before we started taping, but I'll ask you anyway. I know you asked about the secret of your success. Do you think it's that you have a mind like what maybe middle America or that silent majority, whatever that was that Nixon used to talk about?
I certainly try for that. I think Midwest roots is a tremendous asset, Jimmy. Oh my goodness. I couldn't be 90 days back in New York or even in Washington, D.C. and not become myopic. Soon I would start to think that the sun rises behind the UN building and it sets in the Appalachians, and that's all there is to this country. And of course, you and I know that's not all there is. That's a help. Geographically, to be home-based in Chicago and to be traveling middle America 2 or 3 days every week, that's a big asset. But also, I'm trying to keep in my mind's eye a mental picture of one of my wife's sisters, Betty Ruth. I think of Aunt Betty sometimes. She is not the scholar that my wife was. She's a fine, loyal, wonderful, God-fearing American housewife. Not a Phi Beta Kappa, but she's the epitome of grassroots America. And when I finish an essay, we'll say pipelines in Bessarabia or something of this sort, I have to say to myself, now does Aunt Betty understand that? If she doesn't, I rewrite it. Or does Aunt Betty care about that? And if she doesn't, I throw it in the wastebasket.
Why, you've had such great success with the ABC radio network. Why have there been no Paul Harvey clones placed on us? In this society, we always want to copy success, and I don't know of anyone who's ever tried to even copy you.
I'm not sure the networks will allow another Paul Harvey to develop. I'm really not sure of that. I'm sure the president of our network must cut himself shaving a lot of mornings when he's listening to that fellow out there with that great degree of latitude, with such a wide-ranging prerogative. Either that will happen, there won't be any more, or something else will happen. With the multiplicity of media cascading in upon us, including cable and all of its kindred, I think we may revert, as we once did in radio, to offering the listener a wide spectrum of opinion, commentary from left to right. Then the listener can choose for himself. I think that's the more wholesome eventuality.
In listening to you over the years, I know that you have a very positive view of America and the future. Many people always say there's doom in the future, but you say the opposite.
Jimmy, anyway,
how do you get that opinion?
I mean, I can't be an expert on all of these things we're called upon to expert, but I am something of a student of history, and every pessimist ever in history has been buried in an unmarked grave. They always were wrong. Tomorrow always has been better than today, and it will be, and especially now. Oh my goodness, in our nation, this is our shining hour. This is the only land in the world where people are standing in line waiting to get in instead of braving stormy seas in small boats, dying, trying to get out. Oh my, what What a wonderful time. If you could choose a time and a place in all history for yourself in which you would want to live, this would have to be the time. Yeah. This would have to be the place. In our own industry, the technology that's cascading in upon us is such that I can't describe it now because the words for what we'll be doing tomorrow aren't even in the dictionary yet.
But do you have any advice for someone like a President Bush coming in? If he was to listen to your commentary and you wrote him a letter, what would you tell him to maybe look out for?
For the fact that there are sore losers in our midst who have not given up. And there are congressmen named right who are more likely to be wrong, who would like to keep the Washington establishment intact and continue to run things their own way. That would be my counsel to him in his effort to get along with this Washington establishment, including the Washington-based news media. He must not desert the people who elected him, or we'll end up with the kind of government we just got through voting against.
Well, thank you a lot, Mr. Harvey. You remind me very much of an Art Linkletter. You get younger instead of older.
Oh, what a nice compliment. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy.
The great Paul Harvey, and I do mean that sincerely. A lot of people, including me, looked up to him. He just had a way of selling a product because he did a lot of live commercials.
Yes, he did.
He had a way of telling a story. I remember I made it on the Paul Harvey show one day. I had been involved with the life-saving deal of a young child, and I can almost remember hearing it now. He said, Jimmy Carter saved a life today. Not that Jimmy Carter, our man in Montgomery. And then he goes on to tell the story.
Oh, that's cool. That is cool. Do you have that anywhere? I mean, do you have the footage of that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, because it's, there and gone. But I have it up here. I have it in my head.
Great. I love it.
And it's just, that was really, really amazing to hear yourself on Paul Harvey on a story. But again, if you've never heard of Paul Harvey or you've never heard of Rush Limbaugh, you're probably not listening to us right now anyway, because there's no way that you'd be this far into this podcast without knowing who these people are.
I love it.
Very interesting men. Their voices were unique.
Yes.
And charismatic. Yes. And really, both are, as you say, one of a kind.
I agree wholeheartedly. Iconic, to say the least, and I don't know who comes behind them, but Jimmy, I certainly enjoy these Vault episodes every week. I mean, it seems like you pull some kind of rabbit out of the hat. When you sent this to me, I'm like, who interviews Rush Limbaugh and then follows it up with Paul Harvey, two guys that you've never seen on any interview on TV.
Yeah, it's kind of like having in the baseball world Mickey Mantle followed by Roger Maris.
Right. Doesn't get any better than that, folks. Thanks for listening. Jimmy, appreciate you each and every week. Tune in for the Vault on Sweeping the Country next week. Who knows what rabbit Jimmy will pull out of the hat. Good day.
Good day.